In the opening scenes of the movie, we are introduced to a young couple named Sophie and James. They reside in a modest city apartment. Sophie expresses her desire to take an old armchair so she can restore it, despite James not being particularly fond of the idea. Sophie takes charge of the project and is also planning to renovate the couch. It becomes evident that both Sophie and James are content with their married lives and enjoy a sense of happiness. Their financial situation is average. James comes from a wealthy family, but Sophie isn't particularly fond of that lifestyle, which is why they have chosen to live where they do. However, James had lost touch with his father, who was extremely affluent due to his successful business ventures. Unexpectedly, James receives a phone call informing him of his father's passing. To James's astonishment, his father had left all of his property and assets to him. He is offered the opportunity to take over his father's company. James accepts the responsibility, and as a result, the couple leaves behind their old way of life and steps into a new one. They transition from their small apartment to a magnificent, spacious house. However, Sophie finds it challenging to adapt to this sudden change in their lives. The rapid transformation leaves her feeling unsettled. On the very first day in their new home, Sophie dismisses 2 household staff members. In their previous living arrangements, Sophie and James managed all the household chores themselves, and Sophie feels uneasy having unfamiliar maids around. James tries to explain to Sophie that she shouldn't have let the servants go, as the house is too large for them to handle all the work by themselves. He insists that they would need assistance. Sophie, however, holds firm in her belief that they should continue managing their own tasks and live life on their own terms. This significant change also affects James's life, as he now has the added responsibility of overseeing the entire company, with all the burdens resting on his shoulders. Sophie and her husband were facing a lot of stress as they struggled to manage their work and household tasks. Sophie's husband, seeking a solution, shared their problem with a colleague at his company. The colleague informed him about a scientist working there who had developed incredibly lifelike robots. These robots were so realistic that it was nearly impossible to distinguish them from actual humans. They were capable of performing all kinds of tasks just like humans. Recognizing the potential benefit, Sophie's husband decided to bring Sophie to the company to choose a robot that would assist them at home. When Sophie arrived at the company and saw the robots, she was amazed by their human-like appearance. Finally, they settled on a robot named Henry. The creator of these robots assured Sophie and her husband that they were completely safe and helpful. To demonstrate their obedience, the creator asked Henry to perform a seemingly menial task by licking Sophie's husband's shoes. This act indicated that the robots would follow any command, whether good or bad. Despite this notable observation, Sophie and her husband decided to bring Henry home. Henry proved to be an exceptional addition to their household, efficiently taking care of all the tasks. He became an indispensable help to them. Sophie's husband found Henry's company enjoyable and would confide in him. Initially, Sophie found Henry peculiar, but as time passed, she developed a fondness for him. They spent time together, and Sophie even read her favorite books to him. Henry reciprocated their affection and became comfortable around them. His design was such that his happiness was linked to his owner's satisfaction. He was programmed to fulfill their commands and make them happy. The arrival of Henry brought relief to Sophie and her husband, who were previously overwhelmed. However, one day, Sophie asked Henry about emotions, love, and human feelings. Henry eloquently explained the concepts, emphasizing the differences between artificial emotions and genuine human emotions. Sophie's husband, concerned about Henry engaging in such discussions, reminded Sophie that he was just a robot and should not be treated as a human. He urged her not to encourage Henry to believe he was human because his purpose was to assist them in their tasks. Despite her husband's advice, Sophie held a different view. She saw Henry as a perfect companion, almost like a human. He flawlessly carried out his duties without making mistakes, unlike humans. Sophie's admiration for Henry grew, which caused jealousy in her husband. Although he knew Henry was a robot, he couldn't help disliking him. He constantly reminded Sophie that Henry was not a human, but a machine. Sophie, however, disagreed with her husband's perspective, as she believed Henry possessed human-like qualities and emotions. Meanwhile, Sophie's husband became engrossed in his father's business, leaving little time for Sophie. He noticed Sophie's deepening bond with Henry and her increased happiness in his presence. This further fueled his jealousy. Despite his awareness of Henry's non-human nature, he resented the connection between Sophie and the robot. One evening, Sophie was startled by some noise. Concerned, she went to Henry's place to check on him, only to find that he wasn't there. The door was open, and to her surprise, she discovered Henry lying in the garden. As she approached him, she realized that he was in the midst of a dream. This was an unusual and peculiar occurrence for a robot like Henry. Sophie's husband came to his aid, waking him up and bringing him back inside. The following day, they decided to consult a scientist about this issue. They explained that Henry had wandered into the garden at midnight while dreaming. The scientist reassured them that it was a minor glitch, a normal occurrence, and that it wouldn't happen again. They were reassured that there would be no further problems. Sophie mentioned to the scientist that she had witnessed Henry dreaming. The scientist explained that Henry had been living with them for quite some time, and it was possible that he had developed thoughts and emotions towards them. Sophie had treated Henry as if he were human, which caused him to start perceiving himself as one. Upon hearing this, Sophie's husband became angry with his wife, blaming her for everything that had transpired. He believed that her treatment of Henry as a human had led to the error, and he insisted that they should regard him solely as a robotic machine. He insisted that Henry had no feelings and would only fulfill their commands. However, Sophie disagreed with this viewpoint. She would never see Henry merely as a machine, and she didn't believe that he lacked emotions. This disagreement escalated into an argument between husband and wife. Eventually, Sophie's husband demanded that Henry stay away from his wife. He forbade him from spending time with her and engaging in activities like reading books together. Henry, confused by this sudden change, asked Sophie's husband if he had done something wrong, but her husband dismissed his question, instructing him to simply follow orders. The following day, Henry revealed everything to Sophie, which made her angry enough to leave the house. Intelligent Henry then explained to Sophie's husband that their marital issues were not caused by him. These problems arose from entering a new phase of life where they had grown apart and failed to devote time to each other. Sophie's attraction to Henry was a result of their emotional distance. She had developed feelings for him despite being aware of his non-human nature. She constantly thought of him and even dreamed about him. Henry's kindness and likable qualities had also captivated Sophie's husband, leading him astray one day when Sophie was not at home. Henry was deeply saddened by this event, but chose to keep it a secret from Sophie. After reconciling with Sophie, her husband apologizes and asks her to return home. However, Sophie has started exhibiting behavior similar to that of Henry, the humanoid robot. During their time together, Henry developed human-like emotions and confessed his love for Sophie. This revelation leaves Sophie feeling nervous and frightened because Henry has begun behaving exactly like a human. Overwhelmed by fear, she asks Henry to leave and return to where he came from. Sophie informs her husband about Henry's confession, which triggers his aggression. He wakes Henry up abruptly and slaps him before deactivating him. Sophie's husband then contacts the scientist George to have the robot removed, believing that Henry has ruined their lives. Unbeknownst to them, Henry has undergone a significant transformation and is aware that they are planning to destroy him. He pleads with Sophie not to send him away, as he has grown fond of staying with them. Henry accepts responsibility for his actions and expresses deep shame for his mistakes. Sophie, torn by the situation, learns from Henry that he has developed human emotions and feelings for her. She realizes that her husband mistreated him, and this revelation deeply upsets Sophie. Both Sophie and her husband confess that they were attracted to Henry, and they express regrets. They decide to part ways with the robot and focus on rebuilding their lives together. When the scientist arrives to retrieve Henry, they discover that he is no longer obedient like before. Henry confronts the scientist and reveals a shocking secret. From the beginning, Henry never appeared as a robot, but rather as a human. In reality, he was not a robot, but a human being. The scientist, who considered himself a creator of robots, had conducted experiments to perfect human beings. These experiments involved brainwashing individuals and convincing them that they were robots. Henry had been subjected to this process since childhood, leading him to believe he was a robot. However, his time with Sophie and her husband awakened his inherent human emotions, such as dreaming and love. Sophie and her husband were attracted to Henry because he was in fact a human. The police eventually discover the truth and intervene, rescuing all the individuals who were manipulated into believing they were robots. Witnessing his experiment crumble, the scientist becomes unhinged and kills 2 police officers who attempted to arrest him. He also tries to harm Sophie and her husband, but Henry protects them and ultimately kills the scientist. Overwhelmed by the events, Henry becomes deeply saddened and takes his own life, leaving Sophie and her husband forever. The story then jumps ahead a few years, showing Sophie and her husband naming their newborn son Henry as a way to keep the memory of the original Henry alive. The movie concludes here, highlighting the lasting impact Henry had on their lives. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.